Welcome to Freewheeling. We've taken you through the details on hybrid technology, its benefits, its users, and even its manufacturing. On the show last week, you also got the chance to see the latest hybrid models like the Aqua and Prius Alpha. But today I'm driving one of the highest-selling hybrid models globally. Given the tremendous success that the Camry brand name has had the world over for several decades now, it was crucial that after that initial burst of encouragement for hybrid vehicles that came from the Prius, the Camry model line simply had to also go hybrid. It was in the last generation of the Camry that we saw the introduction of the hybrid drivetrain for the first time on this model line. The new 7th generation Camry, launched in 2011, also saw an upgrade on the hybrid Synergy drive system. It was crucial for Toyota to have such ubiquitous hybrid models, and that also holds true for its rivals, which is why we've also seen hybrid drivetrains on popular models from the likes of Honda and Ford. And for Toyota, this meant traveling beyond the shores of the Japanese islands. Now, for any new technology to really take off, it has to do well in a large market. What better market than the United States? Until fairly recently, the world's largest car market, in fact. And hybrid cars really did find favor with the US consumer, which helped boost that technology's popularity. So I figured that with the weather here in Tokyo getting a little bit too cold, cloudy and murky for my liking, it's time for me to head to sunny California. So now here I am in the US of A. The state of California has for long been the flag bearer when it comes to tough standards on emissions and promoting environmentally friendly vehicles. For over 2 decades, the state has supported buyers of greener vehicles with tax credits and other financial incentives. Some of those have now been suspended in more recent times due to budgetary constraints, but hybrids in particular still get the federal tax deduction in the US. Now, one thing that you see all over this country is pretty uniform: huge parking lots. And here in California in particular, when you spend just a few minutes in one of these parking lots, you see a lot of hybrid cars. Now, the state's legislation, of course, is pretty green, but it's also a lot of conscious people here who have chosen to adopt that sort of lifestyle. So cars like this, not surprising. I chose this car, of course, as it's one of the most popular and highest selling in this market. That's the latest generation of the Camry Hybrid. Today we will focus on the American Camry, and in particular the Camry Hybrid. I drove the car from the bustling city of San Francisco to the hills of the Napa Valley, a distance of about 80 kilometers one way. It's not just the green credentials that help the Camry do really well here in the North American market. Traditionally, this has been one of the strongest selling cars, and in fact this space itself, called mid-size ironically enough here in the US, is actually one that sees a whole lot of volumes getting generated for not just Toyota but other players as well. What you're seeing though for the first time is a bit of a difference from Toyota, and that means that the Camry here in the US is a little different from the ones that you are going to get in other parts of the world, because when I say mid-size, the whole focus here is on being just a convenient, very practical sort of a family car, which means it doesn't have to necessarily be luxurious. It needs to actually be more practical. And so in front you're seeing a little bit of luxury because there's extra chrome, and I have to say the looks really do remind of the previous generation Camry. In terms of shape and size too, it does have a similar appeal, unlike markets like India, where the new Camry now is a lot more luxurious. And so in fact it's more in keeping with the Lexus LS. Of course, all these cars are still built on the same platform. The Camry is roomy and therefore fairly large. It's a comfortable 5-seater, and there's no way to tell that this car is hybrid or indeed different to the regular petrol-driven car, except for the hybrid badging, both inside and outside the vehicle. primitive hybrids, the technology has now matured to a point where the driving experience is still actually pretty satisfying, which means that when the system actually is switching between the electric motor and the gasoline engine, you're not feeling any sort of a perceptible difference. The car's performance remains the same, and you still get the kind of power you want. It is an effortless shift, unlike the past where you felt a little twitch or a little tug, and sometimes a noticeable lack or loss of power too. The only thing to get used to is that you suddenly realize you're in EV mode when instead of a little bit of a hum of the engine, there is a very different kind of a hum coming from the battery part.
Performance is optimal and very smooth. Unlike the conventional Camry, which uses a 6-speed automatic gearbox, the hybrid has a CVT or continuously variable transmission that's mated to the hybrid drivetrain, of course. And that's made up of a 2.5-litre petrol engine besides the electric motor.
Now, it's not what you would call luxurious, and yet by way of a feature list, it's pretty ample, because after all, the competition is pretty stiff for this car, and so it's got to hold its own. You do have lots of variants, so you get the basic version even in a hybrid, but the XLE is the top end, and so you pretty much get everything on this. The steering wheel has lots of controls on it, not just for the music system and the Bluetooth phone, but also cruise control down here. All pretty standard stuff these days, stuff that you'd expect really in many ways. It's pretty roomy, the whole cabin, and of course it pampers you even with a few other little goodies. There is individual climate control, there is of course a touchscreen navigation system as well that's standard here at the top end, and satellite radio in this particular car too, which I've been having some fun with. Besides that, on the safety side, lots of airbags all around the cabin, and in the back too, it's pretty spacious. It's very comfortable too, that rear seat, good legroom, and of course a rear AC vent, drop down armrest. Again, like I mentioned, the stuff that you'd pretty much expect for a car at this end of the market.
So the Camry Hybrid is an ample car. Of course, the Asian version is a lot more luxurious and well appointed, and we can hope that we also get that variant soon in the Indian market back home.
Welcome once again, folks, to Freewheeling Hybrid Horizons here on the NDTV network. Now, we have made the long journey to come right back here to India, where we first started with the question, what really are hybrid cars all about? What's the technology all about, and how relevant is it to us? Well, we've taken you through that journey, haven't we? We've tried to look at different facets of the technology, also how it works for people, and also what's going to be coming in the future. But we've come back now to our nation's capital, New Delhi, to explore just how that technology applies, or how relevant it is here in the Indian context, and what are the youth of tomorrow really thinking about going green, going hybrid, and which is why we are right now at the Select City Walk Mall in Saket in New Delhi. And with us, we've got a whole lot of young students from engineering colleges from New Delhi. Besides that, I also have with me the third generation Prius. Now, you've gotten pretty familiar with this car, of course, through this series, but the point I want to make very quickly is that this is the model that's the only hybrid that's currently available here in India. We keep hearing about what's happening from the industry. There are micro hybrids and start-stop systems and what have you, also electric cars, but in terms of what's classically defined as a hybrid, this is really it. You've had another product in the past from Honda, which has now been phased out. Now, the third generation Prius has been very successful. In fact, it has been the most successful generation to date, not just because of the car that you're seeing here, but also because of what it has spawned. There are different body styles. We've run you through that, haven't we? And there's the potential really to go even bigger than that. So the Prius family to really migrate into different kinds of segments in the future. So in India, of course, like I said, this is the one we get. So it's the family car. It's the classic Prius shape. The reason I'm mentioning the shape right now is because there's already talk coming out of Toyota headquarters in North America that the next generation, the fourth generation, may not necessarily have this very distinct Prius identity. The idea to go more mainstream, and which is why the engineers and designers are now trying to develop a more mainstream looking vehicle. So having said that about the Prius, let's get a few opinions on this car, and then of course what it represents to our market in the future. So lots of questions and lots of opinions with all the students here, I hope. Yes? Just a few gentle nods. Yes? Still nothing. You guys all awake? Yes, all right. This lot is still asleep. Let me start with one of you. Tell me, when you look at a car like this, what does it represent to you?
A hybrid technology car and commercial for a common man, that's really great. I mean, it's awesome, seriously. But its cost is something which a common man can't afford.
All right, so the cost is prohibitive. Now that's of course where we come into the aspect of what governments will do to support this. There is talk about some kind of different taxation that might come our way as far as environmentally friendly automobiles are concerned. Still waiting on that, but who knows, the next union budget might offer up something. Any other questions about the relevance of hybrid in India? Anybody else who wants to take a stab at that? All right, we got a question here, so let's get the mic across to him.
Hello, I'm Dheeraj from the solar car team of DTU. It's been half a decade almost that we've been developing solar cars, and lately we came up with a passenger solar car. And the aim is, of course, to develop them commercially now in India, since India falls in the solar belt. Now the problem we are going to face is about the cost. How relevant can it be to develop a solar electric vehicle for the future potential to come up at a cost of almost this hybrid vehicle, as this vehicle is going to face almost similar problems of the cost. So what suggestions do you come up with to overcome this problem?
Well, in India we have the advantage of the huge population base, and of course when we say that, we have to take into account that there's only a certain segment out of that population which can afford even mobility to begin with. Having said that, I think what we've seen with hybrid, especially the successful experiment in markets like America, is that the minute you have larger economies of scale, pricing becomes that much more attractive. Yes, it has to begin with some amount of government intervention. I think we've seen that with electric cars in Europe, where there are certain subsidies on electric vehicles, which makes the cost of those batteries that much more affordable to the end consumer. It's somebody else who's absorbing that cost, and it's not the end consumer. I think that's the kind of direction we need to move into as well. Now, with solar technology, the other worry is about durability. So what's your experience been like on that?
We represent India in all the endurance races worldwide, and the races go up to 3,000 kilometers, 5,000 kilometers. So if the solar cars are sustainable at one go in a week to cover 5,000 kilometers, then the technology is very much sustainable. Now the basic problem we come up with is, how can we really make it cost effective to land at a price of these conventional fuel cars, as in for the cost of say 5 to 10 lakh of rupees.
Any other suggestions or questions regarding how we can try and bring those costs down? Yes, let's get a mic across.
Sir, diesel market is growing this time in India, and petrol prices as they are hiking. How can we expect to hybrid to conquer a market like this, where people who are using petrol vehicles and getting their cars fitted with CNG kits, how at least Indians can expect that this hybrid car will come up to their expectations?
Tell me something, do you think it's the cost of the fuel, or do you think it's the running cost? What's the more
actually,
attractive
sir,
thing?
Both things, sir. Both things.
It is both, isn't it?
Both things, sir.
Yeah. So when you look at the cost of fuel, it is now determined more and more by external conditions and not what happens in India, especially with petrol having been deregulated to some extent. You do find that that's something we can't control, which is where technology like this comes in, where you say that, all right, if this is how much fuel is going to cost, still for every liter I'm going to get a little bit extra out of a hybrid, because obviously it gives me that benefit. But diesel, on the other hand, to begin with has higher mileage, but does have an environmental cost attached to it as well. So until I think those economics change, and until the price of buying the car itself becomes attractive, obviously hybrids aren't going to be in contention. But like I said, that's in the works. In the city that we're in, of course, there's been this huge experiment with CNG that everybody has been congratulating themselves on in the government. The shift to CNG, the larger question, alternate fuels. In a country like India, you have biofuel that's been talked about. You're talking about CNG motorcycles now. What is the relevance of that? I mean, is that a solution that we should be looking at actively? Because let's not forget, it's not just about cars, it's also about your buses and all the mass public transport. You need a good solution for that too. Is CNG good enough, according to everybody here? What do you think?
All kinds of alternative fuels are advantageous. That's not a thing. That's not an issue, but cost is a major factor that affects people making decisions about buying these cars. So, except for CNG, yes, LPG, there's LPG, then you have propane, then you have electric bikes as well that have been introduced in the market. So, it's more about making the consumer more aware about these things, that they do exist and they can take place of conventional fuel powered vehicles.
All right, I have another question now about infrastructure. And first, let me make a point about it. Unlike countries, a lot of times people say all this is good for developed markets, and for developing markets, let's not start aiming so high just yet. At the same time, you have markets like China, where you don't get a building permit unless you have plug points at each parking space. So regulation, infrastructure, these are things where, again, in our civic planning, in any of the urban plans you see, or even semi-urban plans, none of this is being taken into account. Nobody's talking about plug-in hybrids for that reason. So I want to ask you also now about plug-in hybrids. You know how this car, you don't need to do anything with it, right? You just need to fill petrol every now and then. But besides that, the electric component pretty much is on autopilot. The world over, we are seeing a move to plug-in hybrids now. And the big reason for that is that people feel that that's the more efficient way to go. That way you can rely the car can rely on the electric half in a greater way. So the larger question then is that with the future of R&D going towards plug-in hybrids, then are hybrids going to be relevant in the Indian context in the future? Some nods there. Anybody have a question on this or any kind of opinion on this? You have a question? Let's get the mic.
Yes, sir. Well, I have a doubt about the plug-in technology. In India, like if we buy this car and I am living in Delhi, so we see that it's switched to the hybrid technology on the 60 kilometers, which is only relevantly achievable on the highway roads. So how it is relevant to that? How it is used in the city? Because hardly there is any time when we're running it smoothly on the 60 hours. So can you elaborate?
Are you saying that basically it has to be a hybrid like this and not a plug-in hybrid? That's the only thing that's going to work in India?
Yes, basically I'm trying, want to say that there should be a technology which is totally depend on the driver use, that whether when he wants to switch on the hybrid or not, and just not the automatically plug-in technology at the 60 kilometers.
All right, so it's totally dependent on driver use is what we're getting as an opinion there. So on that note actually, then let me go ahead and invite somebody who is a driver of a hybrid. That's Mr. Kulvinder Singh, who is a businessman from Delhi. Welcome, and thank you for joining us here on the show today. Let me ask you this. You have been using a hybrid for over 2 years now, and it is the Prius, of course. Yes. What is it about the car that you like, first off?
First of all, shape, and another thing is environment and fuel efficiency.
And is that the reason why you went and bought it in the first place?
Yeah.
What about the fact that it does have a higher cost than what it should be, given our duty structure? I mean, it's just the duties that takes the cost so high.
When I
that wasn't a deterrent for you?
No, it's written for me because of fuel efficiency. The major thing is in this car.
Your usage of the car?
Yes, is approximately in a day 60, 70 kilometers. And the average is approximately on road is 22 kilometers.
All right, so that's pretty significantly high. Come, let's in fact step closer to the car and talk a little bit through it. Now, you drive the vehicle yourself, right?
Yeah.
All right, so what's your overall usage experience been? I mean, before you had this car, you were obviously driving conventional fueled cars. In terms of drivability, in terms of usage, what do you find works for you?
When I drive the car, it's very smooth, very cool, and when I start the engine, it's very, very cool, no noise in the engine. It's very smooth when I drive the car. Even I pass someone, the car is start or not? So I say the car is start.
Yeah, sometimes you can't make out if it's running. But the question I want to ask you is, if this had been a plug-in hybrid where you needed to charge it every night, would you have found that convenient at all?
This is not plug-in car.
No, if it was, would you have still bought it?
No, then no.
Yeah, so that infrastructure problem remains, right?
Yes.
One more thing that I think a lot of people want to know, and which is the point we were making in the beginning, about environmental consciousness. Ever since you've got this car, what's the reaction been of your friends, family? Have people asked you about its shape more, or have they asked about the environmental impact also?
The both, like that. It's a good car, it's a good shape, it's environment car.
All right, so have you been able to inspire anybody else to think this way? Has anybody followed your footsteps? Have you been able to inspire someone?
Yes. My two friends, and they have already buy the car.
Okay, so that's a pretty good word of mouth, good for Toyota, I guess. But you know, I think if there are any other opinions about hybrid, it's also stemming from the fact that there is misinformation. So how did you first hear about this?
So my friend told me this is a hybrid technology and you buy the technology. So then I buy the car. This is a hybrid car, so you buy this car. So that's why I buy the car.
So your reason was driven by that very point. All right, well, thanks for sharing your experience with us. I appreciate your being here. Of course, if you haven't really been watching the entire series with us, the idea was to try and get you a little feel and flavor of what is happening in Japan, which is really the hub of hybrid technology. What's the kind of technologies that exist? What are the kind of technologies that are coming in the future? So a quick recap, if you will, of what we've already brought you so far on this series.
0.
We are going to explore hybrid horizons. We've begun our journey into the world of the hybrid car, and now we want to better understand just how these cars are so different from conventional vehicles on our roads.
What I have definitely picked up while putting this series of freewheeling together is how technologically driven the sector remains while also staying customer focused. What car makers like Toyota deliver through hybrid technology reflects just that. Be it the Prius and its variants, or even the Camry hybrid, given the need of the hour, hybrid technology is very relevant here and now, unlike other technologies that may be coming in the foreseeable future. With excellent fuel efficiency and a relatively small carbon footprint as compared to traditional petrol-driven cars, the hybrid car is an environmentally friendly solution that is ready to deliver today.